So here we're going to go through the steps involved in putting together the pair of bridle joints that's at the top of this exercise. So I'm just going to spot those two joints here right now. And so the first thing we need to do is we're going to work from the left in. So we're going to square that end, and then we're going to have something to measure in off, which in this case is 50 millimeters in. So here I've just shown the actual drawing here, and just showing you the position we're talking about. And there's the measurement circled. So we'll hook our tape there now. So as mentioned earlier, and we're now measuring in the 50 millimeters, and just put a little stroke there, and I'm going to square a line through that stroke then. And then once I have that line established, I'm going to use the width of the piece itself that's going to be bridled into it. So I'm just barely half covering the line there and just putting a tick on the other side, just a little tick or tiny stroke. And again, I'm going to just square that, and I just illustrate there that it's the same width. And the length then from shoulder to shoulder of tail has to be the same length between the bridle. So that's why I'm going down here, because up at the top I can't trust it. It might be spreading out or narrowing in a little bit and I wouldn't realize it. So I have to go from shoulder to shoulder on the dovetailed member to ensure that both vertical members will remain parallel. So if you're slightly under or slightly over, you'll just have to stay with that, and that's fine. So just to re-emphasize the point there, that we have to go by what we ended up from shoulder to shoulder on our dovetail. So now we'll just transfer those lines that we've just marked on the front face of our exercise. And again, I'm using the width of the vertical member there just to make sure that they're matching with those lines. And here's how it relates to the drawing. Just to have a quick review here. There's the two joints there. Yeah. So after that, then we'll then just return the lines around the edge of that timber, and we'll also bring those same lines in down the back. So now that we have the bridle lines transferred all around the timber, we're now going to mark the actual thicknesses of the bridles themselves, and it's 10 millimeter in, and then the center portion is also 10 millimeter as well. So we just use our gauge here just to set the distance. So we're using our mortice gauge here, and we've made a point in the timber for the two spurs to go into. Now we just slide in the stock there, as I've just done, and just mark it in as if you were marking a mortice. It's the same procedure. And of course, also always mark from the face side of the timber that you're marking. So use your bench vise to hold the timber. So you can use both hands in on your gauge. So you can have one hand concentrating on pressing the gauge in against the side of the timber, while the other hand pushes the gauge to mark those bridles. Here you can see I'm pulling with the thumb of the other hand. So yeah, of course after this then don't forget then to mark which side the waist is after you pencil it in as shown here now. So put in your X's so you don't go the wrong side of the line when you go to cut it. So this could save you making a big error just by merely doing this. So next we're going to place the piece in the bench vise that we're going to take a housing out of both sides. So first we're going to just line up the shoulder line and just put a scoring line with the chisel as I've just done there. And just while it's in the vise, you might as well just put a slight track in it, so when you take it away, it'll be easier to saw that shoulder line. So now we will cut the inner shoulder lines first, and the reason I'm cutting the inner shoulder lines first is I want to ensure that I maintain that distance that I have further down in the exercise that we noted earlier on, from shoulder to tail to toe to the shoulder of the opposite tail. So that's why I'm cutting the two inner shoulder lines here first, so to ensure I maintain that distance. So here, before I cut the outside of the bridle, both bridle joints, I'm going to quickly just review them and compare to see if I shall leave all of the second line or half the second line or whatever, because I can readjust my cut now before I cut that second line. So now I'm going to commence taking out the bridge housings by completing this cut as illustrated here, and I'm also going to cut another line in the middle, anywhere in the middle, just to make it easier to chisel out. And of course I'll do that on both of them. And of course, as always, keep both hands behind the chisel when you're using it. Right now I'm using a mallet and a chisel to take out most of the material that has to be removed. And as we go into this, you'll see that as I'm leveling out the floor, I leave the mallet to one side and I'll be using both hands on the chisel, so I have a bit more control, and I'll be paring the floor of those housings. So I reverse it, and I suppose be aware, as I've mentioned before previously, of the ingrain. Do most of your chisels to suit the ingrain on this particular piece of timber, and yeah, and I'll be at the stage now where I'll be just using the chisel only, and I'll leave the mallet to one side, and I'm just paring now, as you can see, and no longer using the mallet, because I'll have a little bit more control and more fine-tuned approach, I suppose you could say. And if you have to chop the sides like I've just done there, do so. Don't lean back against the shoulder line so as you won't make the shoulder line round, as I've stressed before previously. Now we'll cut the bridle housings on the other side of the piece of timber, and here I'm deepening the track that I've already created down to the required depth. In this case I'm using the bench hook, and you can see there I'm positioning the piece of timber just to line up with the other side, to just double check everything's okay. After that I'll be check the floor of those housings, those bridle housings, just to see is there a high point or a low point. So here there is a little high point. You can see the timber is rocking a bit on the high point, so I'm going to remove that high point now by placing the piece back into the vise, and I'm going to have both hands on the chisel here, and I'm going to use a very fine paring action just to take off that high spot, and I'm going to check it in with the edge of the chisel as I've just done there, and here I'm rechecking again. So here I'm just checking the two vertical members that I have my thumbs on here, this illustration, and I'm just putting them into the bridle housings just to see how snug they are. They should be snug, it should be a nice snug fit as illustrated here. So after that, I'm going to have to measure up from the tailed component to the position of those bridles where they're going to occur on these two vertical components of this exercise. And once I've got that, then I'm just going to use my square, and I won't draw the line all the way across in case I accidentally cut that line by mistake. So the mere fact that I don't draw the line all the way across will guard against me possibly making that mistake as I continue into this exercise. So my next step will be to transfer those lines now around to the edge of the timber as shown here, and do the same on the other side, of course, and we're now ready to gauge it. Next we're going to gauge the bridles on the timber that has the tail socket taken out of it, and the bridle is already set from the other part of this joint that we've already gauged, so we won't have to go through the motions of getting it set here now. That has, obviously we would not want to change because they both have to match, and very important, as I've always stressed before, always make sure you gauge from the face side with both members here. And so here I am, gauging down the other edge, line it in. You need a good flat point in your pencil, and this time it's the center portion that's getting X'd out or taken out. So we're going to start the cut on the ingrain and continue that cut then down on the narrow edge. So as I've stated here in black print, keep the saw running through this corner as you bring down the cut on the edge, and that will give you a flatter wall on the inside of that joint. So there's a little tip, and I know I've emphasized that before previously in this series of videos, and I'm just emphasizing it again. And stay up to the line. Don't be leaving anything for chiseling. You should be able to cut right to the line. It's about accurate cutting. And okay, if there's a little bit of chiseling to be done, so be it, but don't purposely leave piece to be chiseled. So we've kept the cut so by following that instruction that I have in print there on the right, by keeping the cut as long as possible inside the joint. I'm still exiting on the far corner with the saw as I'm bringing down the line on the edge there, on the narrow edge of the timber. And as I said, that's to keep the cut as long as possible. And so continue the cut inside in your vise, and cut it carefully. Don't cut down beyond the floor line of that joint as you're cutting now. Just take it nice and handy, and just cut slowly right up to the line then, and keep checking on both sides, because when the joint goes together, we don't want to see a saw cut line going past. So now we'll just turn this piece and complete the second cut that's made for the bridle, as shown here now. Follow the same instructions, of course, as we did with the first cut. So again, we'll bring that down the line, of course, and again you'll see the saw cut is staying in on the waist side of the line. So just be very aware of that when you're cutting the second line also. So here we are now. We're just taking it down, and they were up close to the line there. So just straighten it out and just keep a close eye as you're doing so. So next we're going to chop out the waist and the bridle with the correct width of chisel. So if there's a 10mm width, then that's the width, that's the size chisel you use. So the sides of the chisel will be clean, in the sides of the joint as well. And I leave a cushion at the very end there where the chisel is. I don't go right up to the line, because I'm leaving that cushion there. So if I want to lever out as I'm cleaning out the excess in the joint, I won't be levering past or pinching the timber past the line of the joint. So that's very important, that you leave your cushion there for the time being. So after that, then you're going to reverse it around in your vise, and of course you'll do the same procedure. You clean out the excess again as illustrated here, and again of course you're going to leave a cushion again, so as you can clean out the excess, and then when you're ready, then you can put it into the vise this way, and you can chisel up to that end line then of the joint, so you're getting rid of that cushion, as it were, that we spoke about earlier. So after that, then we'll check it for fit into the other part of the joint. So here we can quickly check to see if the bridle is a good fit before we make any adjustments. So you can just shove it in like that just to see is it fairly snug. Then I shove it into the top because when the joint goes together, this is the one place you definitely don't want to see a gap. So even though I'm shoving it in the wrong end, because they are the two ends, the two surfaces that will be in contact when it goes together properly. So that will give you a good indication if there's going to be a gap in the joint or not, or if you need to take a little bit off. So it's a good way of quickly checking it. So after that, I'm happy enough, and I just pushed it in here using my vise, and that's the first bridle in place there now. So as with the first bridle, we'll start with the cut on the end grain again here, and we'll continue to cut down the edge while keeping the cut stroke on the opposite corner. And so as stated before, that will keep the inner joint or the inner wall of that joint flat. So as you can see here, we're just going through it quickly. We're cutting the sides of that second bridle for this exercise. And as I say, I keep exiting the blade on the opposite corner. And we'll just complete that cut here now. And next we're going to chisel out the excess here. As stated before, make sure that the chisel is, if it's a 10mm width here to be chiseled out, use a 10mm chisel and leave a cushion at the end, as I've stated before, just to reiterate those points. And again, we'll just clean it out here now, just moving through it quickly, and we'll then take it out of the vise, and we'll reposition the vise so we can concentrate on get the remainder out. And now we're just going to chisel the floor of that joint, watching carefully that we don't go below the line. And once that's done, then we'll just check to see if there are any high points left, which we can use. I use the edge of my chisel there in case there's high points to be chiseled out, and then just try it for fit. Here we have the joint assembled, and usually at this point I might check for flushness and make any fine adjustments as might be necessary. Sometimes you can take it apart if one piece is proud, and just take a very fine shaving off. Here I'm going to plane the waist at the end of the bridle, but first of all I'm just going to score it with a chisel, so when I plane it, it's less likely to burst the fibres, especially if it's not very tight up against the wall of the joint. So that's just a thing I do. And here I'm using my block plane first on both parts of that bridle. A quick plane towards the end. So yeah, just finish it off there. Again, just score on the other side. This is our dovetail in the waist on the end of one of the dovetails. So again, same approach, scored it, and then just use our plane on it. And after that, then you'll might have to do a bit of just give it a bit of sanding. But also here we have this 45-degree cut, by the way. So I use the top of the jaws of the vise as an aid to prevent the plane, or even if there's a sanding block, from rocking. So here is the finished product now assembled together, sanded as well. So hopefully you finish this project to the required spec and learn some techniques with regards to marking, cutting and chiseling of this framed exercise. So that's it. That's the end of this series on this frame. All the best.